Hello, and today we're going to be we're doing an episode of History's All Right, learning about alternate history. So, what should we understand when we're writing alternate history? First thing is the change that you're going to make. Is it a serious one? Is it a serious alternate history you're writing, rather? Because if it's less serious and it's more just fun rather than speculating on what would or wouldn't happen, then you can make it a bit more bizarre. I mean, here's an example. Byzantium survives through diplomacy, intrigue, religious coming together. Say the reconciliation of Catholic and Orthodox happens about, say, 6 centuries earlier. Maybe not. Something like that. That and Europe rallies together more. That would be a much more serious story with serious implications and serious logics. But Byzantium survives by developing the autocannon 500 years early, so that when the Ottomans come to the gates of Constantinople in 1453, they're just mown down. Yeah, that's not exactly going to be a serious what-if scenario. Oh. So, that's an important thing to remember. The tone and the change in which you're making. Then, of course, there's the idea of what are you exploring? I mean, while historians are divided on whether alternate history is like just fun fiction or might even have a place in evaluating factors, you'll probably have to have factors is something people argue about. But one thing that we can say is that alternate history is different. So if you're exploring a certain idea about social change, then perhaps you might want to have a more socially focused thing. Economic change, you get the idea. Speaking of which, don't feel you have to confine the change in the timeline to war and politics. I mean, there are quite a lot of historical changes that could be different. Granted, some are probably less significant than others, but, say different ideas happen at different times. These will have impacts. And from that, the logical follow-on. So, for example, what if, say, the July bomb plot had succeeded, like in Ed Space's What Long Live Our Sacred Germany? Then you have to ask the question, so what's going to happen after this? This change has happened, so what logically follows? And how wide are the effects? What's being affected, who is being affected, and who isn't being affected? As Professor Korb said in one of in a lecture Ed attended back, 2011, 2012, I think it was 2011, asked the question, what difference did the Battle of Waterloo make to the people of South America? Pretty much absolutely nothing. At least to that point. Later implications, of course, may bring in more things, but more people, more life, more effects. But that's the point. Who is and isn't affected? what is and isn't logically changed. What perspective are you writing from? You know, you'll probably need a POV to explore history with. Are they a point of view character or not? Or is it, is it a grand scale? Are you focusing on the major leaders? Are you focusing on like an ordinary person? Is it a bit more macro? And therefore. And perhaps I can point out that not everything has to make a massive difference, and you might even have an interesting alternate history if you think about, say, the question, what if Britain remained Catholic, i.e. the English and Scottish Reformations never happened? Now you can argue that a lot of the social changes, the enclosures, the sort of the enclosures had already been happening for over a century beforehand, and society was changing in certain directions anyway, so whether the change really made that much of a difference, one might say, no, it doesn't really. And one could postulate that. One could also... Now, and don't feel afraid of making your alternate world slightly better than our world. After all, or worse, don't feel that you have... But basically, don't feel like you have to make out that our timeline is the best of all possible timelines. Because, hey, the world could be better, as pretty much anyone living in the present probably knows. Oh, and perhaps try not to do yet another Nazis win World War II, only because it's a bit overdone and a bit boring. Now, we need to address the elephant in the room. Yes, because it's also important to remember that there is an important point about speculative fiction. Firstly, it's speculative. Second, it is fiction. Yes, that seems pretty obvious, but the point of this obvious statement is that you don't have to be right about what would or wouldn't have happened if something did happen that didn't, or didn't happen that did. Because we'll never know. And it's speculative because, in a sense, history isn't copyrighted. Like the general concepts of events that happened in the past are not subject to copyright. So, if you want to write a different scenario, someone's imagined something happened, and you maybe not take the exact same thing they did, but the broad premise, say, I know, maybe you want to speculate that something different would have happened if Britain remained Catholic or the July bomb plot had succeeded. Feel free to do that. Because that is, in a sense, the point. It's almost like a discussion of ideas. So, however you write your alternate history, hope you had a nice time here today, and it was lovely having you here.